Now, I'm glad you were able to join us because you've been going through a bit of a COVID problem, haven't you? You've had COVID. Now, I want you to tell the story. You went. I don't want you to name the concert or the venue
Sure.
because I don't want to alarm other people who might have been there. But suffice to say, it was a pretty big concert and they required proof of double jab. You were able to do that. Therefore, you got in to see the concert. So it was a vaccine passport event at which you caught COVID.
Yeah, I mean, I've been really, really ill over the last sort of 9 days. You can still hear I'm pretty bunged up
Yeah.
as a result, with sort of chest tightness, terrible lethargy. I couldn't get out of bed. And in fact, today is the first day that I feel well enough to do something like this. But essentially last Sunday, so not the Sunday just gone, but the one before that, I went to a big concert, as you say. And you had to prove that you'd been doubly vaccinated, or you had to prove that you had a negative test, because vaccine passports were very much in operation by the Gestapo at that venue. And of course, we all went there thinking, well, this is all marvelous, we'll all be safe. And of course, blow me down, I got COVID. But not only did I get it, people I was with got COVID. I then put it on Twitter, and other people have contacted me from that venue to say they also got COVID. So what does that show us? It shows at best that the COVID vaccine passport scheme is totally useless. And I think at worst is a massive infringement of civil liberties. I think it does, sort of lull you into this false sense of security. It creates a two-tier system. And even the government's own national assessment of it says that vaccine passports are pretty useless. They're very worried that actually all it will do is stop people going to those bigger events, and it will drive people underground to pubs and to clubs where you can be in a basement and drink till late, and you're more likely to get COVID. So the whole thing is an absolute farce, and we need to get rid of it as soon as possible.
Yeah, I mean, you'd think there are advantages to it because the disadvantages are enormous, because vaccine passports, should they become generic, will create a divided society. Those who can prove they've had double jab, you can come into the pub, you can come to the concert, you can go to the restaurant, you can travel. Those who can't prove that, who haven't got a vaccine passport, become second-class citizens. The leader of New Zealand, Jacinda Ardern, was asked about this just a couple of days ago, and the journalist said, won't that create a divided society of first and second class citizens? And with a big grin on her face, she said, yes, that's exactly what it will do.
I mean, what sort of country do you want to live in? It is very reminiscent of lessons from history, isn't it? Papers, please, to go into a venue. I actually am totally against them. I've always been against them, as you know. And when I went to that venue and I was asked to show the vaccine passport, I really took that as a massive affront. I know they were doing their job. I know that.
Yeah.
It is not a legal requirement. The venue decided to do it, but actually it didn't do anything, did it? It didn't protect me. Now, fortunately, I'd been doubly vaccinated. And the really interesting thing, actually, is the disease you get, as I now know, having been vaccinated, seems to manifest very differently to if you haven't been vaccinated at all. So my advice is still the same, which is that if you are in an older age group or you are at risk, then you should get vaccinated. But I think what the bigger worry for me is now what happens with the booster jabs. They know they're not getting the uptake. I think people are worried about those boosters, and they are going to make us have them, because they are going to force us to have them, to travel, to go abroad, and they're already toying with us over this, over Christmas travel plans.
Yes, they're saying, well, there are noises that unless we get the booster jab, they'll take Christmas away from us. They'll cancel Christmas again, which I think is disgraceful. This coercion has to stop, doesn't it?
So if you just look at what the rollout in Scotland, it's been an absolute shambles, hasn't it? It's very difficult to actually implement the vaccine passport scheme. The latest estimates are that it's going to cost businesses between 11 and 18 billion pounds. Have they not noticed we're in a pandemic? Have they not noticed that businesses are already suffering? And if you look at a stadium, apparently to police vaccine passports properly needs another 5,000 staff. These people are absolutely nuts. The whole point about the vaccine rollout was that it does offer you protection and it stops you dying or becoming seriously ill. So why on earth are we rolling out these vaccine passports when there's no need for them and they don't work?
Yeah, you're the second friend that I've had that's been through this. My friend Piers Morgan went to the Euros final, and that was a vaccine passport set up. He was double jabbed. Guess what? Showed his passport, saw the game, got COVID, just like you. So that's two examples that prove that, well, certainly ought to make us think that COVID passports are dubious to say the least, and that they don't work. So, as I say, there's no way that what possible advantages there are outweigh the disadvantages.
None. But I have to say the concert was fantastic.
Well, that's good to know.
I'm not sure it was worth it.
Yeah, you paid the price.
I did, yeah.
Let's talk about a couple of other elements that have come up this week. As a doctor, I wanted you to comment on this. The British Medical Association, which likes to sort of propose itself as some kind of august body of medical genius, but is in fact just a trade union. It's like the National Union of Miners, only for doctors. Is furious that the government is trying to get more GPs to see their patients face to face. So as a protest to this government attempt to get face to face appointments going, the BMA has told GPs not to see their patients. I mean, that seems to me kind of crazy, and also, kind of almost verging on irresponsible.
Yeah, I just want to underline what you've said, which is the BMA is a union. It's a trade union of which I belong to it. I've never really liked their methodology, and I think many doctors don't actually agree with a lot the BMA says. But essentially, what sign does this send out? GPs are there to see patients. And we've seen that the actual face-to-face consultations have dropped from something like 23 million a month down to 13 million. The people who are suffering are the elderly, those people with chronic disease who need to see a GP. One of the things that I don't think people understand is that GPs are not salaried employees of the NHS. They are private businesses that are operating under the umbrella of the NHS. They are paid money to hit certain targets, such as the COVID vaccine rollout, £12.58 per person, and indeed vaccinating young people. It is the job, I'm going to break ranks really with the doctors, because it is the job of the doctor to offer that service. Now, if they don't want to do that, then they can go and do something else. The average GP earns £98,000. And I think what this shows to me is just how out of touch GPs are with normal working people. People have really struggled in the last year and a half, 2 years. People haven't been able to put food on the table. It makes me really angry, actually, that they're sitting there on salaries of over £100,000 saying, I'm not going to see you face to face. It's unacceptable. And it's got to stop.
One of the refrains of hosting shows on Talk Radio, I was talking to a few of my colleagues earlier, and we get this all the time, is GPs and doctors, not yourself, but other GPs and doctors, come on and they say, this myth that it's difficult to see a GP. It's an absolute myth. We're all seeing our patients face to face. It's just not true that we're not seeing patients. You can see your GP, no problem at all. And as soon as that conversation with that GP or doctor is over, our switchboards are jammed with people.
You cannot see a doctor.
With people saying, I can't see my GP. I've been trying for months. The truth is that it remains very difficult to get to see your local doctor, doesn't it?
It really does. And I'm inundated by people telling me that they cannot see a doctor, they cannot see a GP. They're stopped by the receptionist even getting any further than that. People have been complaining of all sorts of complaints, and the receptionist says, take a picture of it. How do you take picture of chronic pain? I mean, it's utterly ridiculous. And then, of course, what happens, and this is where we are seeing the uptick, which is that people are so desperate. And I've added to this by saying to a lady who contacted me, if you can't see a GP, you're going to have to get help from A&E, which is totally the wrong place to go. But where else do you go? And of course, the A&E units are already battling with flu. They're seeing seasonal illnesses, and they're also seeing COVID, and they are going to be in serious trouble. We also know that a lot of the GPs are not working full time anyway. And I think this goes back to one of the Reform UK's biggest policies. We need need to train more doctors. This is where it's all going horribly wrong. But we also need to be able, so for if you are then trained as a doctor and you stay in the NHS for a certain period of time, you should have your tuitions paid back to you by the state. Because at the moment, the system is that those brilliant people who maybe don't come from money, who are inner city kids, cannot be doctors. We are training the wrong people, lots of doctors who then leave the profession. And that is not going to solve the problem long term.
Agreed. Now we're going to pass over something that I know would have interested you, but we did it yesterday. I was pretty dismayed that Rishi Sunak, having already given the NHS an extra £36 billion this year to partly help it tackle the backlog of waiting lists, yesterday announced he was going to hurl another £6 billion at it, which won't solve the problem. So this problem of the government hurling more and more money at the NHS, it now accounts for 40% of our public spending, is insane. But I wondered, as Deputy Leader of the Reform UK Party, if you could, David, speak sort of on a wider issue. Rishi's budget is clearly shaping up to be spend. It's a big spending budget, and this will result, and one of the things that's going to be in it is a rising of corporation tax. And I think there are big fears in the business community that SMEs, small and medium-sized enterprises, may really struggle with these tax hikes.
I couldn't agree more. We don't need more tax. We need smart tax. The SMEs that you mentioned, the small, medium enterprises, are the backbone of the economy. There are a million of them that really got no help in COVID whatsoever. And actually, I'd call for corporation tax to be abolished, and that's a Reform UK policy, to be abolished up to £100,000 profit. And the reason for that is because actually our tax code is so long, 20,000 pages long. It's bigger than the combined works of Harry Potter. And it's very, very complicated. And what this means is actually small businesses then try and find ways not to pay as much tax. Now, the point is what we should be doing is making these companies really economically viable, because if they then make profit, they hire more people and they take them off the government's books. All of this is totally counterintuitive. We also want to take out the lowest 6 million poorest people who shouldn't be paying tax, and we want to raise the tax threshold to £20,000. And we keep talking about this. It's about smart tax, not more tax.
Yes, and of course these SMEs, the small and medium-sized enterprises, they are also going to be struggling now because the government's starting to demand its bounce back loans back. So they've got to repay those as well. So we may, if they're too strict about this, we could see lots of companies going under.
Well, this is my biggest worry. I own an SME. I have a bounce back loan, and it keeps me up at night wondering how I'm going to pay it back. And I know I'm not alone in that. And of course, for those small companies, they got no help at all. They could take more debt. Now, debt isn't bad in itself, but actually the repayment of that debt, you have to structure that. But if you're then having punitive tax on top of that, just as you're starting to recover, remember, many of these companies couldn't furlough anyone because they weren't actually paid a salary. And so they're only just beginning to see those little green shoots of economic recovery. And they're going to be hit by this double whammy of more tax and paying back their bounce back loans. And of course, the minute those companies fold, there's no revenue to the exchequer, and we're going to end up in a complete disaster.
Yes, it's very worrying. We await with interest the details of tomorrow's budget, but rest assured it's going to involve tax hikes and the government spending yet more money, yet more billions.
By the way, we have the highest tax burden in 50 years. Think about that.
I know. It's very worrying. David, I'm really glad that you're getting over your COVID problems. Always a pleasure to speak, and we'll do it again next week.